Nithyananda. This is Kailasa Press Corp with a direct response to India Herald, India News and a Scroll. Let's cut straight to it. You call yourself responsible media, but you are pushing the same anti-indigenous propaganda as your counterparts. You should be standing up for indigenous rights, not helping to crush them. But here we are. We are going to break down exactly how you have abandoned journalism and joined a global campaign to silence indigenous voices. No sugarcoating, just raw facts that expose what you are really doing. All the three outlets, India Herald, India News and the Scroll, they claim Kailasa is fictitious. Let's hit back with the facts. Kailasa meets every single requirement for a statehood under the Montevideo Convention, whether it's population, territory, government and international relations. That's not our opinion, that's international law. The Montevideo Convention spells it out. The political existence of the state is independent of recognition by other states. Black and white, no grey area. The Vatican kept its sovereignty with just a papal residence during the eviction exile. The sovereign military order of Malta has been sovereign since 1798 without traditional territory. But when indigenous people claim sovereignty, suddenly it's a problem. Does it make sense? You know what's really going on here. By calling Kailasa fictitious, you are telling all the indigenous people you don't get to exist on your own term, only on the terms set by colonial powers. As Indian media, you should understand this better than anyone. India fought for its independence from colonial rule. Now you are helping colonial powers deny that same independence to indigenous community. That's not just hypocrisy, that's a betrayal. Indian Herald, Indian News and the Scroll all push this fraudulent land acquisition narrative without a shred of evidence. But here is what you deliberately left out. The facts that you left out, that these are conservative partnerships between US-based indigenous organizations and the Bolivian indigenous communities, not land grabs, not acquisitions, but partnerships. Another fact, these agreements explicitly respect indigenous sovereignty and ownership. They focus on protecting the environment and preserving cultural heritage. Coming to the third fact, the Supreme Pontiff is not even a signatory to these agreements. You knew this but chose to lie anyway. Another fact, that these agreements comply 100% with Bolivian law and ILO Convention 169. They are legal, they are legitimate. End of the story. Meanwhile, real exploitations happen daily. Mining companies tear up indigenous lands, logging operations to destroy ancient forests, oil drilling poisons sacred water sources. But you do not write about that, do you? Because those operations pay for your ads. Your selective outrage shows whose side you are really on, and it's not the side of the truth or the indigenous rights. Indian Herald, Indian News and Scroll claim financial exploitations while completely misunderstanding indigenous values around money and resources. These aren't payment for land, they are investment in community development, environmental protections and the cultural preservations. And the communities themselves control how these resources are used. By suggesting indigenous leaders cannot negotiate fair deal, you are treating them like a children who need your protection. That's not just insult, it is the exact colonial mindset that's been used to rob indigenous people of their agency for centuries. Indigenous communities have their constitutional right to determine what partnerships benefit them. They do not need your permission or approval. They don't need you to save them from agreement they willingly entered. Where is the concern when the corporate pay pennies to extract millions in the resources from the indigenous land? Your silence on the real exploitations speaks volume. All three outlets claim that these partnerships violate indigenous sovereignty while completely ignoring the Bolivian constitution. Article 30, section 2.4 explicitly guarantees indigenous people the right to self-determination. These communities used exactly this right when forming these partnerships. Every negotiation was transparent. Every agreement was documented. Community leaders were present throughout the process. Nothing was hidden or manipulated. By suggesting these communities were somehow tricked, you are portraying indigenous people as naive and gullible. The same racist stereotype used to justify colonization for centuries. The real violation of indigenous sovereignty is you, the media outlets, telling indigenous communities who they can partner with. That's not protection, that's control, and it has no place in journalism. Indian Herald, Indian News, and Scroll attacked the Supreme Pontiff while deliberately ignoring these court rulings. On February 2, 2024, Gujarat High Court completely exonerated the Supreme Pontiff, directly verifying the well-being and the freedom of women involved. Ohio Federal Court ruled in the favor of Supreme Pontiff and ordered the false accuser to pay nearly $500,000 for defamation. And Karnataka High Court declared the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism arrest as illegal, without authority and without jurisdiction. These aren't claims, these are court judgments from multiple countries. By continuing to push allegations that courts have explicitly rejected, you have abandoned journalism for character assassinations. When you use terms like self-proclaimed guru for the Supreme Pontiff while treating leaders of other faith with respect, your bias shows. This double standards isn't subtle, it's glaring. Indian Herald and the Scroll claim that indigenous community reject this partnership without providing a single example of a community-wide decisions to reject. Show us one legitimate indigenous assembly that voted against this partnership. Show us one traditional consensus process that resulted in rejection. You cannot, because they do not exist. What's really happening is the media intimidation of communities who dare to form partnership outside approved channels. You create pressure, then report on the result of your own interference. That's not reporting, that's manipulations. This tactic has been used against indigenous communities throughout history. Divide and conquer. Create internal conflicts. Then use those conflicts to justify further control. It's colonial playbook 101, and you are running it page by page. Indian Herald, Indian News, and Scroll frame normal diplomatic engagement as controversial or improper. This is basic. Meeting with the government officials is how international relations work. When Western organizations meet with the government officials, you call it diplomacy, and when indigenous organizations do the exact same thing, you call it infiltration or deception. Makes sense. Your double standard exposes your agenda. Diplomatic engagement is acceptable for everyone except indigenous organizations. The Supreme Pontiff is not directly involved in these diplomatic initiatives. These are independent actions by US-based organizations. You knew this, but chose to confide them anyway to target indigenous leadership. Where is your concern when corporates meet with the officials to get permission to exploit indigenous lands? Your selective outrage reveals who you really serve. India Herald and Scroll somehow twist environmental protection into exploitations. This takes serious mental gymnastics. These partnerships are explicitly designed to protect the environment, preserving biodiversity, maintaining forest integrity, and supporting sustainable indigenous management. Meanwhile, you ignore the actual environmental devastations caused by the mining, logging and oil companies. The real environmental criminals get a free pass while you criminalize conservation effort. Why? Follow the money. Your selective concern reveals your agenda, preventing indigenous communities from implementing their own environmental protection strategies outside corporate control. Scroll claims false representation at international forum and immigration violations without a shred of evidence for either accusations. Indigenous representatives have legitimately participated in UN forums following the exact same protocols used by all civil society participants. The UN has published over 21 reports documenting the persecution faced by Kailasa and indigenous communities. All indigenous representatives traveling internationally fully comply with the immigration laws. They enter countries legally, maintain proper visa status, and depart according to regulations. But you provide zero evidence of any violations. No document, no governmental statement, no legal proceedings, because none exist. Your attempt to criminalize indigenous participation in global governance reveals your belief that indigenous voices should be silenced on the world stage. To Indian Herald, Indian News and Scroll, your reporting isn't just inaccurate, it's harmful. It continues a colonial legacy of silencing indigenous voices and criminalizing indigenous self-determination. As media outlet, you should understand better than most the damage done by colonial narratives. India fought against the same narrative for independence. Now you are perpetuating them against other indigenous communities. That's not just bad journalism, that's a betrayal of your own history. Every headline calling Kailasa fictitious, every story criminalizing indigenous partnership, every fabricated allegations serve one purpose: keeping indigenous communities isolated, divided and powerless. More than 40 media outlets worldwide have already removed similar content after recognizing their role in this persecution campaign. Will you continue pushing these colonial narratives? Or will you remember what real journalism looks like? This persecution won't silence us. This falsehood won't erase us. This campaign won't stop indigenous communities from exercising their rights to self-determination. The world is watching, history is recording, and the truth will prevail. Nithyananda.